Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Revolutionize the States podcast presented to you by VenewLive. I'm Emily Heidel, and we have a lovely guest. I'm very honored to be interviewing her here today. I have so many questions for her that I can finally have answered through this interview. So without further ado,
Oh my God.
Jenny Zha, thank you for joining us.
Yay. Thank you so much for having me, Emily. You're
Yes.
so legit. So I'm intimidated to be on this podcast.
No.
Yeah, please take it easy on me.
I will take it easy, but also she says I'm like Jenny is like absolutely legit. You know, I feel like the best way to start this out is actually one of our previous guests, Alexis Adoyan, a journalist who we interviewed a couple of episodes ago. If you have not listened to it, you should. We were having just a side conversation after the interview, and we were just talking about different people in like the industry, and I was like, "Oh yeah," it was like, "You know Jenny," and she was like, "Yeah," and like she was like, "Jenny is someone who always has her shit together," and like amongst a lot of other people we were talking about, it was like a lot of people don't have their shit together, but she was like, "That's the one person who always has their shit together," and I'm like, "It's true.
Oh my God.
It's so
Thank you
true."
so much, Alexis. Wow. I appreciate the conversation, especially how positive it was. I don't know if I have my shit together,
Okay, uh-huh.
but I'm trying my best. I'm
Yes.
trying my best.
Well, it
Yes.
comes across. It really does come across that way. But before we get into the actual interview, can you introduce yourself and what you do for people who probably don't know? Because you also like you're like always in like the shadows of everything, but she's putting a lot of stuff together. So anyway, can you introduce yourself?
For sure. So my name is Jenny Zha, and I am the CEO of Infinitize, which is kind of like a digital media consultancy. I've been working actually with a lot of brands and a lot of artists as well, sort of behind the scenes to put together more integrated marketing efforts to try to reach, different audiences or try to engage fandom at large.
So Infinitize is primarily, like you said, primarily digital, but I mean, a lot of it has to do with like integrating some physical into the digital as well, correct?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think we say digital as in, what is the best way to be able to engage people from all over the
I
world?
see.
And so it is using different channels, right? So it's
Hmm.
like sometimes when we say integrated marketing, that really just means like, what is your goal and what is the best way to be able to get there?
Hmm.
What sort of channels do you need to be on? What do we need to do? And sometimes that does sort of like include some of these offline opportunities as well. So it's like kind of like putting it all together.
Hmm.
How does that sort of like overall plan look like?
Yeah.
And where do we start with that overall strategy?
Hmm.
So that's why I feel like I'm always all over the place. And when you ask me what I do, I'm like, I have no idea. Whatever works.
Yeah. So, like,
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned how, okay, so at a time, actually, before we get into this is probably a good segue into other things. At a time, how many projects do you have going on? Like it's like right now, like how many projects do you have going on?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, right now, probably like 4 or 5 projects that are
Okay.
happening all together.
Uh-huh.
But a lot of timelines overlap. So like sometimes we're rolling off of a project and directly into another project.
Mm.
We're also in discussion, for a lot of projects that are happening in 2022.
Hmm.
So there's never kind of like a moment where you feel like you're in a stable place and you're like, oh, like I'm working on these things right now and I'm really
Uh,
sure about where we're going.
yeah.
It's always kind of like changing, and
Hmm.
the number of clients kind of like vary with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It seems like the only people that know what you do are the people who work with you. Like you said, like just I wonder, like, do your parents understand what you do?
Not at all.
Okay. They're just like,
I mean,
go ahead, go ahead.
yeah. No, sometimes I don't even understand what I'm doing. I think the main part is, I think, like, very fortunately, just a lot of these projects and things like that come from referrals or,
Hmm.
people talking to each other about different things that are going on. And
Yeah.
so, we always come from a place of like, we just want to help. And like these
Hmm.
sound like, cool things that we need to be involved in. And so it
Hmm.
just kind of like naturally get to the point of, we're working on the project.
Are you allowed to say some of the projects you're like, or I guess music, or actually not just music related, but uh, projects you're like, you have worked on and are currently working on through Infinitize or that kind of thing, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, the main ones that we're working on right now
Hmm.
for in terms of some of the artist projects is, as you know, Emily, because we work very closely on this together, is,
Hmm.
Alexa and sort of Zany Bros and working together on sort of that global strategy for Alexa to connect more with K-pop fans overseas.
Hmm.
And then, we also work very closely with Woo-sung from The Roast,
Hmm.
on his independent activities.
Hmm.
And then we're just starting to work with Ghost Nine under the Maru Entertainment banner, so that they can develop more of that overseas presence.
Hmm.
For the rest of the clients, I feel like we're kind of in the space where it's like things are always rolling in and out,
I see.
and so this is probably the most relevant
I see. I see.
to our industry. And I
Hmm.
feel like I always tell people it's like my expertise is probably more in entertainment platforms,
Okay.
and working more with, streaming platforms
Hmm.
or, companies or brands that really have like sort of that more digital presence.
Hmm.
But it just so happens that like I think like very recently we have started working with a lot more artists,
I see.
and yeah, it's kind of developing in that way.
Well, with that being said, we met through a digital platform, sort of, I guess, app that at the time was trying to scout creators in the K-pop space, I guess, for podcasts through the In
Yeah,
My Feels podcast with Dre, and so through that, like, it was still music integrated in a way, but
yeah,
like you said, through a platform.
yeah. And I feel like, working with that sort of like audio based platform, it's
Hmm.
like that's where I really realized that like Korean entertainment has like seeped into so many different industries that like sometimes it all just blends together.
Hmm.
And there's just always so many cool things
Hmm.
to be able to, to work on, even if you're not directly in the industry. So like that's, happening across the board as we sort of like integrate more and more K-pop elements into these like other fields as well.
Yeah.
Like Emily, the way that you were able to kind of, integrate K-pop into, sports, and everything related to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, things that we're trying to do with some collaborations, even in like esports or like, some of these like more peripheral industries, I do feel like there's just more and more potential to be able to open up the borders a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so with that also being said, Infinitize, I saw on your website it started in 2014, but that wasn't when you fully broke off and like did this on your own. So where did you start? Can you give a background of like your experience in the entertainment industry before starting your own company?
Yeah, for sure. So I I guess this is like more of a personal story because I started following a lot of like Korean entertainment elements, back in high school. I just happened to kind of like, look into some internships that were available at Soompi at the time. So Soompi is like one of the largest, platforms for Korean entertainment.
Hmm.
And I think like when I was looking, and being really active on the platform, there was really no way to like avoid Soompi.
Oh.
Every time that you wanted to get any sort of information on TV shows or any sort of talent, like it would always come up as one of the top search results. So
Mm.
I kind of like got integrated first into the platform, as that community, as that, fan. Discovered an opportunity to be able to, they were actually building up their news team. So I started, writing some articles with them, that transitioned into like more of like a long-term sort of freelancer
Mm.
position, on their editorial side. And then just kind of like slowly built up from there where, all of a sudden I was like covering concerts and like interviewing K-pop acts.
Hmm.
Um, and then when I graduated from college, I actually went directly to Soompi, who's actually owned by Rakuten Vicky,
Mm.
and had a position there, leading short form content and engagement.
Hmm.
So of course, like along the way, I was like doing a lot on my own as well. Like for example, I had opened my own e-commerce store while I was in high school, and I was like working on that. I was doing a ton of like, just like different sort of internships and also part-time sort of like positions at different PR agencies and things like that. So
Hmm.
that experience is not like kind of like the more holistic, I guess, like picture of like what I was trying to pursue, but it just worked out really well because that was essentially my hobby. I got to really like, work in something that I was very passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, like the rest is history in
Mm-hmm.
the sense that, Vicky, I was really doing a lot more original content and campaigns to be able to sort of like engage that fandom. And that's where I think like, really learned a lot. Yeah.
One of the and if you go to Jenny's website, which I will
I,
provide.
I love that you looked into all of these.
Yeah, it's a very like well made. Like it has testimonials and all these really cool things on there. And one of the, I guess, and correct me if I'm wrong. You worked on I think it was the Vicky series with like Monster X and Gallant.
Yes,
Right. And that's like
yes.
it's when you call my name. Okay.
Yes,
Okay. Right.
yeah.
And that was is that one of the bigger projects you worked on? And also you worked on Alexa's like Rising Legends, that
Yeah.
and Strike It Up and all that stuff. What like was the Monster X one of the bigger projects you've worked on, or was it, or just like
Oh,
one of
for
the bigger
sure.
ones? Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think it was honestly it was such a cool project.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually produced that mini documentary series,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really funny because it kind of just started as some content exploration that we were doing on the Simpy side in terms of coverage of Gallant. Because at the time, it was like right about the time, Gallant had released his collaboration solo with Eric Nam and
Oh
Tableau.
right. Yeah.
And so we were trying to, see if we can do an interview or like something like that. So we got to, talking to his agency about collaboration opportunities. And then we kind of had this idea because Monster X was starting to announce, some of their US tours. And we're like, listen, they actually have a lot of parallels in their music journey. Or like what we wanted to really show was that these two vastly different people, as in like, their upbringing and where they grew up and everything, pursued a similar dream. And now they're both going to be on tour and like,
Yeah.
meeting fans around the world. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of parallels that we could draw. So we actually reached out to Monster X's agency
Mm-hmm.
and they agreed. So then we kind of facilitated that entire meeting. And then they ended up singing Monster X's song together and Gallant was singing in Korean. So it just
Mm-hmm.
like was something that sort of like exploded out of this like piece of content that we were really just trying to explore,
Yeah.
and turned into this big thing. So yeah, that was a very cool project for sure.
So
Yeah.
when you were working with Vicky and Soompi, were you? I know Soompi and I guess Vicky as well, or in the U.S. are based in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
Were you traveling a lot during that time, or were you you would just travel whenever necessary, whenever it happened to be?
So I would say like we do most of our stuff in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And like I get this question a lot previously when I was doing a lot of like panels and things like that. It's like our lives are really boring. You would think that, like working with a lot of like K-pop talent, it's like, oh my gosh, you're like going everywhere all at
Yeah.
once. Most of the time I'm like in front of my computer typing.
Mm.
And that's like the way it was at Vicky. So like we only really traveled for like much larger projects or like if we needed to be somewhere,
Yeah.
or like we had something planned with the community.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise it was like very much like a regular sort of like 9 to 5. It's just the content that you worked on was really cool and interesting.
I see.
Yeah,
I see.
yeah.
So then, what year was it when you officially like left Soompi and like start like made Infinitize like your full time?
Yeah, I started Infinitize, I guess like more as like a full-time venture
Okay.
in 2019, early 2019.
Okay.
And we were actually coming off really, really big wins at Rakuten Vicky and
Mm-hmm.
Soompi, because I mean, as you know, like I had been leading the Rising Legends project,
Mm-hmm.
which is like really actually originated from this um, sort of like need to see more global talent sort of like integrated into K-pop.
Okay.
And especially like because there are so many like just great dancers or vocalists, or rappers that were out there, who were fans. Like we wanted to be able to showcase that. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where we actually worked with Alexa for the first time and brought her over to Korea
Mm-hmm.
to film, her own reality series and also, her first kind of like pre-debut music video.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And then the second thing is I actually also was working on one of our tentpole activations called Soompi Awards. So I
Mm-hmm.
was leading the efforts for Soompi Awards, which is, like it's kind of like a voting sort of event for global fans.
Mm-hmm.
And fans every single year, like we basically let fans like, vote in, for their favorite actors and dramas or for their favorite musicians and artists and things like that. And in 2019, we actually broke a Guinness World Record
Yeah.
for most used hashtag on Twitter in 24 hours,
That's
which
awesome.
is like really a testament to fandom
Mm-hmm.
everywhere.
Mm.
And like I remember so clearly that like actually that particular category that we had people vote in, um, I'd spent so many years like over the holidays just like um working on that category and like I was like on New Year's Day like posting tweets and stuff to
Mm-hmm.
try to get people to vote more. For me, like for so long, I think like Simpy Awards was like one of like the proudest things that I have ever worked on,
Mm.
proudest projects. Because like that whole category actually originated from just like a tiny conversation that we were having
Mm-hmm.
about fandom representation, and in its last year it kind of was able to encourage all of these fans to represent themselves and to represent their favorite groups, and
Mm-hmm.
ended up breaking a Guinness World Record. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like coming full circle in
Mm-hmm.
a sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, like that's definitely one of the highlights of my career.
Yeah. I mean, I remember it was was it the best fan award or like it was something like it was like a fan driven award, correct? And
Yeah. So
yeah.
yeah, the category is actually best fandom.
Best fandom. Okay, got
Yeah,
it. Yeah. And it was
yeah,
I remember it was like neck and neck XOLs and Army just like going at it. And XOLs
yeah.
XOLs won, right?
Yes,
Okay, got it.
correct. Yeah.
Well, the Soompi Fan Award, that wraps up, and then beginning of 2019, you were like, okay, now it's time to jump off. And first of all, how did you know, like, okay, now is my time to leave and do this on my own?
Market and Vicky had restructured a lot of different teams,
Mm-hmm.
and so for us, it was kind of like the original Vicky that we were working on was just like non-existent anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other side, like I think what made me really realize that like I could actually do this
Mm-hmm.
is because like I think from my perspective, you know, I just wanted to do and work on projects that I was like very, very passionate about.
Mm-hmm.
And so, working with yourself and sort of like managing that entire process, like,
Yeah.
is that way to be able to accomplish that?
Yeah.
And like, especially like in a situation where you're in control of your own time and your schedule, and you can basically have the flexibility. I mean, I very fortunately am able to have the flexibility to like choose what I work on. And
Mm.
so I think like from that sense, I was just pretty ready for a change.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've been working at Soompi for like maybe like 8, 9 years at that point,
Wow.
maybe even like close to 10 years. Yeah, even starting from like being a part of their original news team,
Wow.
way back when, and then sort of like being on that journey of like growing together with them.
Mm.
And so for me, it was just like, yeah, let's do something a little bit new now.
Now, when you started, and a lot of people listening to this may, like the point of this podcast is to show that there's a lot of different people doing a lot of different things behind the scenes, not typically just being a manager or songwriter or artist or what have you. There's a lot of different elements to this entertainment industry. So maybe
Yeah.
people are like, oh, that sounds cool. Like, and a lot of people talk about the digital nomad life. Like, people just want to have that now. And like, how can you do that type thing? But of course, when you first leave a full-time job, there's like some sort of like, of course, maybe nervousness of, I need to constantly have projects so I can stay afloat. When you left Soompi, did you have a lot of projects already lined up, or was it kind of like taking a leap of faith?
It is more, I think, like taking a leap of faith. I think,
Mm-hmm.
like, from my perspective, again, like I was able to work with a lot of really amazing people
Mm-hmm.
at Viki. So it's like very lucky that I think like I was going into a field where I already was very familiar with
Mm-hmm,
it.
mm-hmm.
There were people that I could reach out to even for sort of like advice and like
Mm-mm.
just trying to understand or reorient myself.
Yeah.
I think, to your point of, there are people out there that like want to do this, but maybe don't have sort of like the avenue and like, they would be leaving full-time positions and like,
Yeah.
that survival,
Yeah.
is the first part. I think like, again, like there's so many things that you can start building up even when you have a full-time, career,
Mm-hmm.
that you can start even volunteering at to get yourself like, in the door,
Yeah.
so that like to really get more experience.
Mm-hmm.
And like if this is something that you're really passionate about and that you really want to be able to pursue, I think like it starts with learning, right?
Yeah.
So getting yourself out there and like meeting the people that you need to meet, and then turning that into like new opportunities that
Mm-hmm.
might help down the line, when you decide to make that leap of faith. I think that's really what matters,
Yeah.
and that's actually what I went through too. Is like I already had a lot of these like conversations that were open, and so for me it's much more about let's try to figure out like how to be able to reach out to different people and like
Mm-hmm.
just make sure that we have peace. But yeah, there's always no right time to do it, I guess.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
you have to do it.
Now that you've done this, how has it been adjusting? Like you said, like you went from doing a full time job to now, like you're your own boss, and of course, or someone like myself, when I'm doing my own thing, it's really hard to stay self motivated if I don't have someone like on me,
Yeah.
keeping me, on track, I should say. Was that a hard transition when you left, or I mean, from what I know, it doesn't seem like a hard thing for you to like stay on track and stay motivated and like, as Alexis put it, having your shit together. So was that a hard transition when you left?
Um, Probably for me because I was so used to just going out there and doing my own thing,
Yeah, yeah.
because when I joined Simpy, actually the role that I had was created for
Mm,
me because I've been working, just like, part-time and freelancing at Simpy for such a long time.
yeah,
So like a lot of it was like, let's craft this role to be like what we feel like would be the most effective, but
yeah,
also like what you might want to do.
yeah.
So I was very lucky in that sense. Even when I was in high school, I was like starting my own like e-commerce
Hmm.
businesses and
Yeah.
like, just trying to go out there and like get as many things as possible. I mean, to put it shortly, I just love working. I'm obsessed with working. So
Mm,
that's, I don't know. It's like literally, it's like turned into a personality trait these days. But so I feel like I have a lot of just like willingness to go out there and just like accept new things are happening. So
mm,
for me, I think it's less about keeping myself motivated. Though sometimes like I do have days where it's like it's so packed, but yet I have like a billion things to do,
mm,
where it just feels very difficult
mm-hmm.
to want to finish all of that. But
Yeah.
like, I don't know, like I think, time management is also a big thing where it's like, hey,
Mm,
like, listen, if you don't finish this within this time and this time, like you are going to be so behind. And
mm.
that's my motivation.
Right, right. I mean, why do you think you enjoy working so much? I mean, and I think also on your website it says like you're passionate about passion or something, like something to that effect.
Yeah.
Like, and I can that of course drives people, but like, is that your main driver of just like I just want to continue to work on things I'm passionate about, so I just like continue to want to work, or do you feel like there's something else that like you want to achieve or like show to yourself that like that's why you want to keep working?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think like it really comes down to, first of all, I think like I'm so fortunate and I recognize I'm very fortunate to be able to have the flexibility of working on projects I really want to work on,
Mm-mm.
and take on projects that I really want to work on. I feel like that's the first thing. And then the second one is just like it's I think it's motivating to constantly level up in that sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like I think like for every single thing that I'm working on or doing, like I always feel it as, the next step up of like, hey, through this, I'm learning how to graphic design. That's just an
Yeah.
example. I mean, like, there's a lot of like self-taught things
Yeah.
where through this experience, like I've actively gotten, one step further into leveling up that skill of mine, or like,
Mm-hmm.
doing something a little bit new, or like having that new experience. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that is a very motivating factor as well.
Definitely, leveling up is, or showing yourself that you can continue to level up has definitely can be a motivator. And I feel like through the work I've done with you, I feel like I've been like, oh, I'm like Jenny's made me feel like I'm leveling up or something like that. It feels really good, and I feel like since we've met, it's
Yeah.
been like that. So I'm very, very thankful to you.
No,
But
I mean, like, I feel the same, Emily, because sometimes, like, you talk about things and I'm like, that's so interesting. Like, I'm learning a lot from what you're saying and like what you're doing and like just your thoughts and perspectives as well. So,
thank you.
I mean, that's what I feel like, having a really solid team and being,
Mm-mm.
surrounding yourself with people that are sort of like you in that sense
Mm-mm.
is so rewarding. It's because you're constantly like in this mindset of like, oh, there's so much that I don't know. Like,
Mm.
how do I go out there and like, become like this person in this sense, and like try to absorb, I guess, like all of these like good qualities and values.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, yeah, that's the best part, I think.
Yeah. Well, another question, and I think I've asked you this before, but I just want to clarify. The name Infinitize, did that come from Infinite?
Yes,
Yes.
I
Okay.
love Infinite.
Okay. Okay.
It's very motivated by Infinite. I was a huge Infinite fan.
Mm-hmm.
I just remember like even like the way that I became an Infinite fan. I was actually covering their show in New York,
Mm.
and I had seen them perform live, and that was the moment when I was like, oh my God, like, they're such strong performers. And
Yeah.
like it was honestly like a life-changing moment for me.
Mm.
And then I just also really like the meaning of infinitize,
Mm.
which not a lot of people know it's like an actual word.
Oh.
And it really means to like free yourself of like
Mm.
time and space and circumstance.
Mm.
So it's like it kind of like adds to this overall mission that it's like
Yeah.
anything is possible if you just kind of like go out there and pursue it.
Yeah. So, what are your goals with Infinitize for, or what? Yeah. I mean, of course, to free. Well, okay, I'm going to let you say it. I'm gonna sound stupid. What are your goals with Infinitize?
No, that's what you said.
Okay.
To be free of time, space, and
Yeah.
circumstance. No. I mean, yes, but also, I don't really put like too much emphasis, I guess, like about going about certain goals.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, for everything and every project and every campaign that we work on, it's like always find something new to learn from,
Mm-hmm.
or find something innovative where you would kind of like be proud to showcase that as your work. Like, that's what I constantly feel is like, how is this adding to what I've already done, right? Like, what are some of the ways that, we can level up, some of this experience, and like, just make sure that, we're doing our best in terms of, pushing it and getting it out there. So,
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of like the goal, for us to be able to, kind of work on more internally, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And then, externally, I think it is just like trying to find more companies that we can add more value to, meaning, what are some things that, we see already that like, some companies are maybe struggling with,
Mm-hmm.
or like, that we can basically go in and integrate ourselves as part of the team and be able to help, or, collaborate in a way where we are all sort of like benefiting, from that experience.
Hello, everybody. This is Emily. If you've reached this part of the interview, that means you're at the end of part 1. So you can check back for part 2 next week. In the meantime, make sure to keep up with everything Revolutionize the Stage on our Instagram and Twitter at RevTheStagePod. Thank you for listening. See you next week. Bye-bye.